Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 4164. Today's date is 20 July 2026. It's been almost like evening at exactly 7 p.m. and I'm kind of like standing in the rooftop holding umbrella at the edge of kind of like a wall, and there is a lot of rain actually happening. You are kind of like listening a lot of kind of like a droplets over here. It's like a lot of rain over here. Yeah. Because of this thing, I did not went to work out. Yeah, because like basically it's this thing. Now the rain is never been kind of like simply the reason that I never really shouldn't supposed to work out. No, nothing really at all. The problem is that na, I am kind of like right now suffering from some little bit of cold. Okay, I have a little bit of something that like a little bit cold, like a sardi and things and that and that. I think that I shouldn't supposed to be take a risk with my health. So it is better to kind of like stay at home probably at least for a day. And tomorrow if I kind of like feel really good, then yeah, proceed. By the way, the today's rain is a kind of like a much more exceptional. Like it was too much. Okay. There is only one thing that I wanted to mention, that why does rain actually happen during the evening? Like averagely, like every single time when I kind of like experience this thing, rain actually happen at the evening at maybe like 5, 6 p.m., 7 p.m. Okay, like at least where I live, like at least like over here, the rain is actually happened almost like exactly when I went to kind of like at the evening. Okay, like a 5 to 7 that block. Okay, yeah. It's not really that the rain does not actually happen in the rest of the time. It actually happened, but most of the rain is actually happened in the evening. Exactly at maybe kind of like a 5 to 7 p.m. I don't know. Maybe it kind of like a somebody I am experiencing this thing, or maybe kind of like a somebody all around the world, but I'm not really sure. But from where I live in kind of like a central part of India, and the rain are here are monsoon. Probably urbanization might gonna affect sometimes. I don't know, but averagely, almost like if I'm gonna say the 100% of rain actually happened, almost like a 60 to 75% of 60 to 65% of rain, or at least 70% of the rain is actually happened during the evening at almost like a 5 to 7 p.m. Okay, yeah, this just kind of like just my intuition, or I don't know, whatever I'm kind of like saying this thing, but yeah. But one thing I really love about rain is that I love rain. I don't know, I am like a basically hate it or deny it or whatever it is. I just love the rain. Like when the rain actually happened, I just can't just kind of like a sit at home and kind of like a doing nothing. And no, it's just like I wanted to see the rain. I don't know why. There is a kind of like a some sort of inside of me just wanted to kind of like a see the rain. If I'm kind of like a went to the rooftop and kind of like holding an umbrella and just kind of like a somebody record just stupid artifact, but I love rain. I really like rain. Yeah, it's not really that I don't really love the rain. I love the rain. Yeah, sometimes I don't love. I like it rain. Like, it's a kind of like one of my favorite season. Okay, so rain is a kind of like one of my beautiful thing. Whatever. Right now it's gone. No, it's not gone. It's a kind of like a tiny droplets are over here. By the way, still it is good. Okay, yeah, I can move on. No, it is a rain. Yeah, it is a still rain is actually going on. Very heavy rain, by the way, but fine. It's not really that much kind of like a somebody affecting, but yeah, it's good. Okay. So what do I supposed to be recording artifact right now? Uh I don't know. Let's ask question. Okay, yeah. Because if I ask the question, now the question might be kind of like a much more better way to kind of like a give me direction that what do I supposed to say and things and that and that. So yeah, let's ask question. Alright. Okay, so question is, what is the simplest explanation of Adam? Oh, okay. First of all, what is this question, and why am I asking this question to myself? I wanted to build a AI that could predict the future. Okay, Before I wanted to build such a AI that could predict the future, I wanted to aware of all the possible consequences that if I build such a AI that could predict the future, what might gonna happen. So basically, is this thing. That's why I went to ChatGPT. I tell my kind of like a simply idea regarding about I wanted to build such AI that could predict the future, name as Adam and things and that. ChatGPT kind of like a suggests me hundreds of all the possible consequences in question format. This is one of those questions. Now regarding about this question says that key a simplest explanation of Adam. Like basically someone kind of like a explain someone try to want to know what is actually Adam, then how do I supposed to define the Adam. um Adam is a AI that could predict the future. Simple. Okay, yeah. It's no kind of like a very like a using kind of like a technical language and things and that. Just simple. Adam is a AI that could predict the future. That's it. Okay. Like basically, it does not say it could kind of like see the future. Like if I'm gonna say see the future, that means you knew the future, and that's why you are kind of like a letting it see. Predict means like that you are predicting future. Means try to figure it out the what might be in a future and things and that. Like seeing the future and predicting the future are kind of like a two different terminology. Seeing the future, that means you are so sure that what exactly the future might be, and the predicting future means like you are kind of like something not so sure about kind of like a things. You are kind of like a giving showing the future regarding about probability ratio and things and that. Yeah. So simple explanation of Adam is that Adam is a AI that could predict the future. Oh my god. This umbrella is broken, by the way. Okay, yeah. The handle is completely broken. Whatever. Let's just ask another question. Okay, yeah, it's very simple question. By the way, I didn't really thought that. Okay, yeah. Who will use Adam first? Oh, who will use Adam first? First, like I will gonna use the Adam. Okay, yeah. Like basically, is this thing I am actually build the Adam, so obviously I have to be use the Adam to kind of like a making sure that he is the Adam is a kind of like a performing really well and things and that. But the question is actually not about that. The question is actually about that key kind of like a somebody who is this product for, like a, who will use this Adam first, like this is a kind of like a simply the something that are which for like a basically is this thing. Now let's take a kind of like understanding the context. Okay, yeah. So let's say like I build a something. Okay, yeah. Now rain is gone, by the way. Yeah, it just I have to be. Yeah. Wait, this umbrella is a kind of like a somewhat something broken, whatever. Okay, so what I was kind of like saying that ki who will use the Adam means like that ki like every product is kind of like a somebody made for someone or things and that. So basically is this thing is the Adam is for somebody like a basically teenagers or Gen Z or millennial or kind of like a specific kind of like a human or corporate people or what. Okay, that's a really good question, because when you try to kind of like a build something, you have to understand that ki who are you building for. Okay, so uh okay, so basically is this kind of like a somebody Adam for who, like basically this kind of like a AI that could predict the future. This kind of like a something Adam is kind of like a belong for which kind of like a people, what are those people, what they will kind of like a do and things and that. Okay. Okay, so this is kind of like a really good example. Okay. Basically, is this thing that now it's not a kind of like a typical AI that kind of like a like for the mass production and things and that. No, definitely not. Why? Why it is not kind of like a mass production? Because it's not possible for me, okay, to kind of like execute Adam for mass production, and my intention are never really wanted to kind of like a something build such a AI for kind of like a build a kind of like a future prediction model for kind of like everybody and things and that. No, it's not. It's a it have a kind of like a very limited access for limited amount of people. Okay. Let me tell you one thing why. First of all is that I'm not really sure that will I be able to be kind of like a execute AI for kind of like a mass people or kind of like a for everybody? The reason is that it's not like a basically let's understand what is exactly AI and what's exactly the prediction model. Okay, like a basically generative model. Okay, like a chat GPT, Gemini, those are kind of like a generative model. Okay, and basically Adam is a prediction model. Okay, yeah, those are kind of like a different, by the way. Let's understand the kind of like a some generation model, like a generative AI content. Okay, generative AI content. Okay, yeah. So what exactly is this thing? Let's take an example as a chat GPT. So chat GPT is a kind of like a generating content from whatever the kind of like a data that it has. Okay, yeah. So basically is this thing, it always kind of like a telling the information regarding about the whatever the data that it has. Okay, yeah. If the data is kind of like a bit more older, then kind of like a chat GPT does not kind of like a give you the kind of like a some latest information. No, it does not kind of like a give you that information. Why? Because of that key, the latest information are not actually stored in the chat GPT. Okay, yeah. It kind of like a generate the content from regarding about the whatever the data that it has, and it kind of like simply generate that piece of content. Example, if I'm gonna say kind of like that key, explain me. Oh my god, the lightning, very crazy, by the way. All right, yeah. If I'm gonna say that key, a kind of like a something that key, generate me a kind of like an image about the kind of like a scientist named Einstein. Okay, so basically what it does, like Einstein and kind of like a simply like eating a spaghetti. Like basically is this thing. I wanted to generate an image about a kind of like Einstein who is kind of like eating a spaghetti. Okay, so what exactly it does? AI will kind of like take a photo of Einstein. Also, AI kind of like take a photo of person who is kind of like eating a spaghetti, and kind of like a somebody the replace the kind of like a face. Okay, yeah, with kind of like a much more AI based version and things and that, and to kind of like make sure that AI image photo AI image kind of like a look as much as realistic or as much as kind of like a better or kind of like a clean or professional. So yeah, so this is what it is, kind of like a take the image number one, it kind of like a take the information from this place and this place, merge it together, and kind of like a create the content or generate the content or generate the kind of like a information that is called generative model. Okay, yeah. Now Adam is a prediction model. Now what's the prediction model? My god, rain, sorry, not rain, by the way, it's a kind of like a something the like a like basically, do I put the my put my phone, I am kind of like really scared. I am kind of like putting my phone in airplane mode. I don't want any kind of like a hassle. Okay, I put my phone in airplane mode, so this might be kind of like much more better for me. All right, all right, yeah. Like sure about like a basically like a like I don't want to kind of like a struck by lightning and became the Barry Allen while recording Artifact. I don't know. What I'm saying is that key prediction model. Okay, yeah. So how does kind of like a prediction model work? So prediction model is not a kind of like a assembly model where kind of like assembly take the data from this where and this where and kind of like assembly present in much more better way. No, it's not. A prediction model is a kind of like that ki it could whatever the data that it has. Okay, like basically let's take a kind of like a some prediction model means that it could predict, means like that let's take a kind of like some example. Okay, yeah. So I'm gonna kind of like take an example that key, take a simple example. Okay, let's take kind of like take a simple example. Okay, yeah. So I wanted to establish a kind of like a business. Okay, yeah, a cafe business. Okay, a restaurant. So I what do I supposed to do? Okay, now if I kind of like put the same request on ChatGPT and Gemini, like a generative piece of content, a generative AI, then what kind of like answer it kind of like a provided? Okay, so if I'm gonna say I want to kind of like a simply establish a kind of like a simply a restaurant, so ChatGPT and Gemini kind of like a give you such a information regarding about the whatever the information actually kind of like a feed into it regarding about how should you supposed to kind of like a simply make the a restaurant better, what should you supposed to do, what kind of like a cuisine, understand the local kind of like how do you supposed to marketing, kind of like a things and that kind of like it's also kind of like a telling you that you don't really have that much amount of money, so kind of like how should you supposed to be kind of like execute without money, how it kind of like a some mouth publicity will gonna happen. So basically it kind of like a somebody giving the all the information regarding about the whatever the information that already kind of like a written in kind of like a book, paper or newspaper or kind of like a media and things and that or internet. It kind of like somebody suck that or kind of like a take that information from the internet and kind of like a present in front of you. Okay, yeah. It's a kind of like that, a kind of like a chef is a kind of like a somebody making a dish for you, like a basically is this thing that ki you went to the restaurant and kind of like a say that ki I want sushi. So basically what it does that ki kind of like a chef is kind of like a made a sushi for you from the ingredient that it has. Okay, he does not create the ingredient, the ingredient is already available, and that ingredient is a kind of like a data, and the chef is a kind of like a only the algorithm of ChatGPT and things and that to kind of like only present whatever the ingredient that it has. It kind of like a create that ingredient to kind of like a make sushi for you. That is called kind of like a somebody generative model. Okay, yeah. It generate a kind of like a somebody model regarding about the whatever data that it has. Now prediction model is a kind of like a very differently. Now let me tell you one thing regarding about how the prediction model actually work. Let's take a same example that कि I wanted to kind of like a somebody build a kind of like a business, run as a start kind of like a somebody restaurant business. Okay, so what do I supposed to do? I put the prompt in Adam. So what does Adam will gonna do? Adam will kind of like a take the same information, like a basically what does kind of like a ChatGPT do? It kind of like a same information. Okay, yeah. And what it does, it kind of like a do the simulation. Means like that ki whatever the prompt that you put, whatever the information that you put. Okay, yeah. It kind of like a somebody act as a kind of like a somebody generate the content. It kind of like a generate the kind of like a information for you. Okay, yeah. But that information is not kind of like a finalize. Whatever the kind of like a information that kind of like a somebody Adam kind of like a provide. Now that information use as a kind of like a base information to run the simulation. It run the simulation on that information regarding about that key. If we could kind of like a build kind of like a some startup, then what is at least success rate? Then basically it run the exact simulation on the on its kind of like a some server regarding about that key. If you build this build this kind of like a restaurant with this much amount of money, then how should you supposed to do regarding about the whatever the kind of like a previous kind of like a step that it kind of like a somebody available in data, it execute from that data and try to figure it out that ki what kind of like a ways and things and that like let me tell you one thing. ChatGPT kind of like a kind of like a tell you the data, like a tell you the kind of like a way that this is the way that you could kind of like establish the business. But Adam is a kind of like a somebody whatever the data that it has, it kind of like a somebody run that data to run the simulation regard in inside there, that if you kind of like execute from that way, like if the ChatGPT kind of like give that information that how should you supposed to be run the business or run the restaurant, it run the restaurant in the software that key how things will gonna happen. Does kind of like a customer client will gonna happen, what kind of like assembly the cuisine that you make, what kind of like assembly the what kind of like assembly the kind of like assembly dish that you make, does people like it, how it is actually marketing, where is the kind of like your location, is your location is kind of like assembly valid, does people will kind of like see it or not, like basically is this thing, what is actually your marketing strategy, how does like if the whatever the marketing strategy kind of like a recommend, if we kind of like implement that same marketing strategy, then what will gonna happen. It kind of like a run on multiple scenarios. Multiple scenario means like not just one scenario, almost like a thousands of scenarios regarding about every possible scenario, that if you did this thing what will gonna happen, if you did this thing what will gonna happen, if you did this thing what will gonna happen, if you did this thing what will gonna happen. And whatever it kind of like assembly happened, it kind of like a tell you that if you did this thing it went to failure, if you did this thing it might gonna failure but not that failure, if you went this thing it you might gonna get succeeded but not that much succeeded, if you went this thing you might get failure but you in the long run you will kind of like get succeeded. So there are multiple possibility, you will kind of like Adam will kind of like show it to you, and whatever the from that possibility Adam learn from that possibility, Adam also learn from that possibility, and it also kind of like simply show you the exact way. It's a kind of like that like making a dish. Let's imagine a kind of like a simply that key you went to the restaurant and basically is this thing that key you said chef that key basically I want sushi. Now that chef doesn't know the sushi, nothing really at all. Okay, yeah, the sushi is not even exist, that sushi continental dish is not even exist. So basically is this thing that what is actually is this thing that key the chef is actually saying that key okay like basically he doesn't know, so basically he tried to kind of like somebody whatever the kind of like a sushi that is kind of like available. So basically what it does, it kind of like a somebody, it like, okay, let's kind of like a somebody similar example. Okay, let's take a simple example. Okay, yeah, so let's just say you went to the restaurant. Okay, yeah, like I'm kind of like giving you as a Adam example how that Adam will kind of like perform in a kind of like a simple language. Okay, so you went to the restaurant, you wanted to eat the sushi like a basically a famous chef who kind of like a make it, who is a famous chef by the way, the Ramsey, maybe, I'm not really sure, I'm not really sure, let's say kind of like a famous kind of like a chef. Okay, yeah, and you want to eat the sushi exactly like that famous chef actually making. Now your chef is a kind of like somebody, he also can make the sushi, but basically your sushi, like basically your chef sushi is a kind of like a somewhat something different than the Gordon Ramsay sushi. So what is actually your chef will gonna do, your chef will kind of like a try to match with the kind of like a Golden Ramsay sushi, how it kind of like a makes and things, and that it kind of like a do the research that kind of like a how much kind of like a salt it has, how much kind of like a pepper that it has, how much sweet that it has, how much kind of like ingredient that it has. Okay, yeah, it kind of like a try, test, fail, again, try, test, fail, again, try, test, fail, learn, again, try, test, learn, fail, again, try, test, fail, learn, mistakes. Like basically it kind of like a went through multiple kind of like a some variation and things, and that. And then after that, after you attempt almost like a hundreds or maybe thousands of attempt, then after that you could kind of like a make a such a sushi which is exactly kind of like a sushi which kind of like a Gordon Ramsay kind of like a make it, the famous kind of like chef and things, and that. This is what kind of like exactly Adam will gonna do. Adam is a kind of like somebody try to do the all the simulation scenario regarding about that how should you supposed to run the business, regarding about this scenario, this scenario, this scenario, this scenario. Every scenario actually run on the kind of like some system regarding about that how does people will interact and things, and that and that and that and that. And from that scenario, Adam will kind of like tell you this is the way that you could kind of like build your system with almost like a 97% of probability ratio, that if you follow this thing then you will kind of like build your kind of like a something business with almost like a 97% of success rate. Okay, 97%. Okay, it does not kind of like show you 100%, because the chaos theory, butterfly effect will always be there. It's a chaos theory, like basically everything is actually happen and things and that. So yeah, and also kind of like Adam kind of like give you step by step instruction that what should you supposed to do day 1, day 2, day 3, day that everything. Okay, like that is what kind of like a prediction model, like Adam is a kind of like a predicting what will gonna happen and things and that. Now one of the kind of like a biggest kind of like a simply the strength of Adam, it has a simulation, and that is a simulation requires like a, it is kind of like a very difficult for me. Why it is kind of like a difficult? Because like let's just say, let's take a kind of like a simple example is that if I'm kind of like simply run the prompt that key suggests me a kind of like a way to kind of like establish my restaurant and things and that. Okay, yeah, now basically from the data it kind of like showing the information regarding about that how should you supposed to be make the kind of like assembly restaurant as good as possible as it can. Okay, yeah, but how about the kind of like effect? Okay, yeah, and cause. Let me tell you something about effect and cause means what. Let me tell you one thing. The simulation is actually came from something like evidence. Okay, example is this thing. You are running the race, you win the race. How do I supposed to be believe that you win the race? You need a kind of like evidence, right? Like you need a kind of like a trophy, certificate, or kind of like a proof of evidence that you kind of like win the race. Okay, yeah, how do I supposed to believe that you kind of like win the race? Okay, so same thing actually happened that key if I kind of like somebody put the prompt that key suggests me a kind of like a somebody way to kind of like establish my restaurant and things and that. Chat GPT or any other kind of like AI kind of like give you the way that this is the way that you could kind of like establish your kind of like a restaurant and things and that. But how do I supposed to prove the evidence? That evidence is actually came from the simulation process. Now that simulation is a kind of like somebody add the resistance, a normal people how they kind of like somebody resistance and things and that. Now let me tell you something regarding about the pattern. Okay, yeah, because the simulation is actually kind of like a base on the pattern. Okay, now what is actually the pattern? Now every world, every people, every kind of like a celestial body, nature, everything that you could see, atom, nucleus, new everything is actually following the particular pattern. Okay, yeah. And this is what it is, like basically entire universe is actually following the pattern. Okay, yeah. Okay, if you're not really understanding the pattern, let me tell you something. Tonight is a night, tomorrow day, day after tomorrow night, day night, day night, day night, day night, month after month, year after year. Sun rotate around the kind of like Sagittarius yeah, galaxy. The kind of like earth is actually rotate around the sun, moon is actually rotate around the earth, and things and that and that. We could predict the kind of like a planet position, we could predict the kind of like a tomorrow where we'll supposed to be wake up. We could also predict that what is actually the kind of like a atom might gonna move at one place to another place. How does kind of like electrolyte and kind of like a electron actually move, and things and that and that. Okay, yeah, we could kind of like a predict the pattern. Okay, now in the pattern there is a kind of like a chaos theory too, like a sometime chaos will gonna happen, and from that chaos prediction is a kind of like a fail. Example, let's take a kind of like a football match. Last night I kind of like a world cup watch, Argentina versus Spain. Now basically in the football there is a lot of kind of like a chaos will gonna happen. Who will kick the ball, how much he kick the ball, basically does it contact really well or not, does he kind of like a dribbling a well, does goal will gonna happen or not. There are so many kind of like a possibility that might goal will gonna happen or not, and things and that and that. So basically when the chaos theory actually happened, when the butterfly effect actually happened, prediction model does not really work that well. But the chaos is kind of like not really happen that well. Like we are arrive at such particular period of time where kind of like suddenly the things are kind of like happen through pattern. Okay, yeah. Now basically how do I supposed to be kind of like determine the pattern and things and that from the people information. Okay, let me tell you one thing. Adam is a kind of like a how the backend information that like basically is this thing that data, the information actually where it came from. It came from the artifact. Okay, now I will not gonna mention regarding about the artifact. Okay, yeah. But artifact is a kind of like that people who kind of like a recorded artifact and things and that and that. Now basically is this thing that artifact have that kind of like information, and that information share through Adam. Now Adam have information regarding about how does people think regarding about every possible scenarios and things and that and that. Now if Adam knows that how does people think regarding about every possible scenario, every demographic people and things and that, so in that situation Adam will try to understand, try to simulate that key. If I establish this particular kind of like a restaurant in kind of like a, let's just say kind of like a US, Europe, or let's say kind of like a London. Okay, I wanted to establish a kind of like a restaurant at kind of like a London. So basically what will gonna happen, the kind of like a simply the marketing plan will not gonna execute if you kind of like a simply the marketing plan as a kind of like according to the Indian context kind of people. No, you have to be kind of like a need a data of the how does London people kind of like a think regarding about the food and things and that, what is actually their favorite beverages, what is actually they love to eat and things and that we need information from the kind of like a London people, or what does kind of like they think and that, and from that thing, if the Adam knows that how does kind of like a London people kind of like a think regarding about what they like, what they don't, and things and that, in that situation Adam run the scenario, because it kind of like a creating as a kind of like a evidence. Okay, yeah. Like as I mentioned, like a kind of like a when you kind of like a running the race, you need a kind of like a evidence that do you win the race or not. So basically same thing happened when you kind of like establish a kind of like a business. That business is kind of like a simply simulate through kind of like a digital kind of like a interface of what does kind of like a people think if I kind of like establish the business and things and that, and kind of like simply run the scenario, kind of like the digital, create the digital people, create the kind of like a digital interface, kind of like a create a digital kind of like a simply environment and scenario, kind of like a create a kind of like a digital marketing strategy, kind of like a create entire digital scenario, digital world by the way. Okay, yeah. And in that digital world it kind of like a run through multiples of kind of like a scenarios, multiple simulation, multiple kind of like a consequences, run that scenario, run that kind of like a consequences in that scenario, to kind of like making sure that you will kind of like get the kind of like a better prediction regarding about how should you supposed to be execute a kind of like a business in as much as better way possible. Okay, so this is called kind of like a prediction model. Okay, yeah. sometimes I just kind of like over explain things and that. But there is a one thing I realized, that when I kind of like talk about this particular stuff, I'm kind of like a really more aware of that. How do I supposed to make my kind of like a simply Adam that could predict the future and things and that. But still, it is kind of like a so long away. But I have a kind of like a faith in me that I could able to make this thing. That's some kind of like a recording such an artifact that talking about this particular stuff. But whatever. So this is a kind of like a Adam that could kind of like a do all those kind of like a things that just blows mind and things and that. Okay, it's not really that Adam will always be kind of like a successful. Adam will also kind of like a give you the probability ratio. Regarding what's the probability ratio, means like that when Adam realized that I cannot able to be find a kind of like a way to kind of like a get as much as better, it kind of like a give you the prediction model with kind of like a confidence percentage. Okay, yeah, confidence percentage in probability ratio. Like basically sometime in the running a kind of like a restaurant business, it might gonna say 95% confidence I have that if you follow this particular step, then you will kind of like establish your restaurant. Okay, yeah. But at some certain point, Adam does not kind of like provide you that much information. And what is actually that some certain point when the chaos actually happened, like when there is some sort of scenario required when some certain scenario kind of like a work on chaos theory. Example, stock market. So basically is this thing, Adam does not predict the stock market. Why? Because stock market is a kind of like only chaos theory. It work on chaos theory. It work on kind of like a butterfly effect. Okay, so in that particular scenario, Adam might gonna kind of like simply give you couple of kind of like some information, but the probability and kind of like a confidence that it has almost like a 30% or maybe 20% or maybe 15%. Okay, have you ever seen that? Like basically is this thing in the kind of like a running a kind of like a business, Adam kind of like a gives you 95% of kind of like confidence ratio, but kind of like a stock market, it does not predict that much well, because stock market kind of like a run on chaos theory, it run on kind of like assembly the kind of like a butterfly effect and things and that. Adam does not kind of like give you that much kind of like information regarding about this particular stuff. So yeah, also Adam does not kind of like predict regarding about that who will kind of like win the sports match and things and that, because sports are also kind of like a simply rely on kind of like a butterfly effect. There are so many possible consequences will gonna happen, so many things and that. Okay, yeah, it's kind of like simply give you prediction confidence of almost like a 10% or maybe kind of like a 5% or maybe sometimes kind of like simply nothing at all. Like sometimes kind of like say just like 10% confidence that I have, okay, if you kind of like do this thing, just probably this might gonna happen with 10% confidence. Okay, not too much more than that, because it kind of like goes with lot of kind of like assembly butterfly effect. But if you are kind of like try to predict a possible consequences in after year of year, like let's just say I wanted to implement a plan that I will kind of like execute after decade. In that particular situation, Adam will kind of like give you kind of like such a scenario that kind of like gives you kind of like 100% confidence, kind of 100% confidence. Okay, yeah, if you are execute action kind of like after so many years. Okay, yeah, like let's just say kind of like somebody is this thing, I wanted to kind of like start a SIP and kind of like let's start from 5,000. So if I kind of like invested 5,000 rupees, okay, like basically I decided that I wanted to invest kind of like only 5,000 rupees. So where do I supposed to be invest? And I'm kind of like only hoping for long term invest. So Adam will kind of like give you so many kind of like a prediction model regarding about that what might gonna happen, things and that, what kind of like a better SIP, gold kind of like investment or kind of investment opportunity and things and that. And it kind of like tell you that what kind of like a better way so that you would kind of like invest money so that it might gonna happen. But still investing money and things and that, it is also kind of like based on chaos theory. Adam does not kind of like giving you that. It's kind of like that na ki regarding about investing money, Adam does not kind of like give you that much kind of like simply production, that much prediction, well prediction. But Adam will kind of like give you better prediction regarding about something that let's say you wanted to execute a kind of like a particular law in your country and things and that. Let's just say I'm belong to the India and kind of like I wanted to execute a kind of like a law regarding about the women education or women power and things and that. So what might gonna happen, it kind of like run the scenario regarding about every possible things and that. I'm really tired to talk right now. I just wanted to end here. All right. So this is the kind of like a easiest explanation regarding about the Adam. But some one of the easiest explanation is that Adam is a kind of like AI that could predict the future. All right. This is it. I have to bend here. And thank you.